Okay, so imagine this for a second. You are the final boss of philosophy. You're the guy whose books make grad students just, cry in the library at 3 in the morning. You're Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel.
That is a formidable reputation to have. He really is the Mount Everest of Western thought.
Exactly. But here's the setup for today. It's 1831. You're in Berlin, you're 61 years old, and you're about to die. But instead of writing one last super dense chapter on, like, the phenomenology of spirit,
Yeah.
you secretly write a manuscript about breathing
That eating.
and eating and how to wake up in the morning without having a complete existential crisis.
It's a fascinating premise, isn't it? The idea that the great system builder, at the very, very end, he looks at this massive cathedral of logic he's built and asks, okay, but where's the kitchen? Where do I actually sleep in this thing?
That is exactly what we are unpacking today. We've got our hands on a text called The Science of Living Spirit. Now, we have to be responsible here, right out of the gate. This is presented as a speculative reconstruction. It's a work of fiction, essentially, a philosophical experiment that's attributed to a lost Hegel manuscript. So we're not claiming this was, dug up in a Berlin backyard.
Correct. But the provenance, I think, matters less than the provocation. The text tackles a problem that, well, anyone who reads a lot or thinks a lot eventually runs into it. You build this house of truth in your mind. You figure out your politics, your theology, your worldview. But once the house is built, how do you actually live in it?
That's the disconnect. You can know the history of the entire universe, but you still get hangry. You still have to deal with a bad back. Hegel is famous for the concept of absolute knowing.
Yes, absolute knowing. This is the end point of his phenomenology,
Yeah.
the moment where mind fully understands reality.
But this text asks, okay, what comes after absolute knowing? And it proposes absolute living. It's trying to bridge that gap between high theory and the simple fact that you have to breathe oxygen to stay alive.
It's the move from the library to the street. And it begins with a very famous image, one that usually depresses people. The owl of Minerva.
Oh, I've heard this. The owl of Minerva spreads its wings only with the falling of the dusk.
It's poetic, but in traditional philosophy, it's kind of an admission of defeat. Minerva is wisdom. The owl only flies at dusk, meaning we only understand history after it's over.
So we only understand the French Revolution after the guillotine stops chopping.
Exactly. We only understand our youth when we're old. Wisdom is an autopsy.
Which is bleak. It's basically saying, hey, you'll figure out what your life meant right before you die. Thanks, Hegel.
But this manuscript flips that completely. It says, the owl doesn't die at night, a new day begins. It argues that the system, all that knowledge, it isn't a tomb, it's a launching pad. And the first thing it launches you into is the most basic biological rhythm you have, breath.
This is where I started to get skeptical, to be honest. I mean, breathing's automatic. Do we really need a whole philosophical framework for inhaling, it feels like? I don't know, over-intellectualizing a reflex?
And I understand that reaction. But the text argues that if you don't intellectualize it, or at least if you don't bring awareness to it, you miss the fact that breathing is actually, it's a logical argument.
A logical argument? How?
Well, think about the structure. Hegel loves the dialectic, this movement through opposites. Breathing is the perfect physical dialectic. You have inhalation. The text calls this appropriation.
Okay, so I'm taking something that isn't me, the air, and I'm forcing it to become me.
Exactly. You're negating the independence of the air. You're pulling the world inside.
Yeah.
That's the first step. Asserting the self. But if you stop there,
I pass out and die.
right, if you only appropriate, you destroy yourself.
Yeah.
So you have to have exhalation. The text calls this externalization. You give yourself back to the world, you release, and then there's the pause.
That little gap before the next breath.
The unity of the two. The text argues that your body's solving the problem of me versus the world about 12 times a minute. You're constantly negotiating these boundaries.
There was a phrase in this section I actually underlined because it was so weirdly pretty. It says, we need to stop viewing ourselves as atoms.
The atom view is how most of us live, I'm a sealed unit, you're a sealed unit, and we just bounce off each other. But the text proposes we view the individual as an aperture.
An aperture, like on a camera, an opening.
Exactly. If you're an aperture, you aren't a thing. You're a place where the universe is passing through. You are a finite opening for infinite breath. It completely changes how you feel about your own boundaries. You aren't in the universe is doing you.
Which sounds lovely and all until you get to the section on eating. This is where the text gets a little Metal. It calls digestion the philosophy of the stomach.
It is violent. We don't need to think about it, but eating is an act of destruction.
Yeah, the apple is just minding its own business, hanging on a tree, being an apple, and then I come along.
And you destroy its form. You chew it up. But, and this is the key concept, you sublate it. Aufheben. It's a German word that means to cancel, but also to preserve and to lift up.
So you destroy the apple.
But you preserve its energy, and you lift it up into human thought, human action, human life.
So my lunch dies so that I can have this conversation.
In a way, yes. You're turning dead matter into living spirit.
Yeah.
The text says, this proves the world isn't alien to us. If the world was truly alien, we couldn't eat it. The fact that we can assimilate the world proves we're made of the same stuff.
It also talks about waking up as a daily resurrection, which, given how I feel before coffee, that feels accurate. But it treats it as this serious spiritual act.
It challenges the assumption of continuity.
Yeah.
We just assume I am the same person this morning as I was last night. The text says, not necessarily. Sleep is a dip into the unconscious, a little death. Waking up is the active work of reconstituting the I. You have to pull yourself out of the abyss and decide all over again to be you.
Okay, so we've got breathing, eating, waking up, the basics. But then the text takes a turn into the stuff we try to avoid. Pain, aging. And honestly, this is where I need you to sell me on it, because the text talks about pain as the reality of the negative.
It's a difficult section, no doubt.
It feels a bit easy for a philosopher in an armchair to say, yes, pain is just information. I mean, tell that to someone with chronic back pain. It doesn't feel like information. It feels like suffering.
And the text acknowledges that.
Yeah.
Of course. But it asks, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
If we had no pain, no resistance, no limits, what would we even be?
Happy.
We'd be undefined. We'd just be a gas. We'd have no edges. The text argues that pain is the experience of a limit. It is the spirit bumping up against its own boundaries. In Hegelian thought, you cannot have development without friction. You can't have a story without a conflict.
So pain is the wall that defines the room.
Precisely. It forces the spirit to say, this is me, that is not me, and something is wrong. It drives consciousness. It forces us to pay attention to our own existence. If everything was smooth and perfect, we'd just sleepwalk through eternity.
Okay, I can see that friction creates traction. But what about aging? We usually view aging as a pure loss. I'm losing my hair, losing my knee cartilage, losing my possibilities.
We view it as this tragedy of subtraction. But the manuscript offers this really beautiful reframing. It calls aging sedimentation, or fulfillment.
Sedimentation, like layers of rock.
Think of it like a statue. When you're young, you're a block of marble. You have infinite potential. You could be a David, or a Pietà, or a gargoyle. But because you could be anything, you aren't anything yet. You're abstract.
Right. Potential is just a fancy word for haven't done it yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As you live, as you age, you chip away the marble, you make choices, you suffer, you love, you lose.
Yeah.
That's the sculpting. The text says wrinkles aren't damage. They are the inscription of history. An old body is a concrete body. It's a life that has actually happened.
So the goal isn't to stay a smooth, uncarved block forever. The goal is to become the statue, even if the statue is a little weathered.
Yes, it's the shift from abstract possibility to concrete reality. You've become someone specific.
That brings us to the ultimate specific moment, death. The text is surprisingly blunt about this. It doesn't promise us, a harp in a cloud.
No, it steers a middle path. It rejects the traditional religious view that Steve or Sarah floats up to heaven with all their specific memories and personality quirks intact. But it also rejects the total materialist view that you just click off like a light bulb.
It goes back to the breath again, doesn't it?
It does. It defines death as the exhalation that is not followed by an inhalation for you, but it is followed by an inhalation for the spirit. The life force that animated you continues. It moves into new shapes, new people.
That is tough. It asks you to identify with the life force, not with yourself. That requires a massive ego death before the actual death.
It's the ultimate philosophical demand, to realize that the I was just a vessel for the we. And that transitions perfectly into the next segment, intersubjectivity.
Which is just a $10 word for other people.
Relationships, society, love here.
And the text points out something so obvious I felt stupid for missing it. We breathe shared air.
It's a physical reality. We are in a shared atmosphere. You are inhaling right now what I just exhaled. Biologically, there is no total separation. The text uses this to argue that the individual is a myth. The I is always implicitly a we.
It moves past the famous master-slave dialectic, doesn't it? For listeners who skipped Philosophy 101, Hegel usually describes relationships as this fight for dominance. I want you to recognize me, you want me to recognize you, so we fight.
That is the struggle of history, yes.
Yeah.
But this lost manuscript proposes a community of breath. It suggests we can reach a point where the boundary between us isn't a wall, but a window.
It uses the word transparent.
Yes. In love, the text says the I and the thou become transparent to each other. You don't merge into a blob. You maintain your difference. But the difference no longer separates you. It connects you.
And it doesn't shy away from the physical side either. It talks about eros.
It validates romantic, erotic love as a high spiritual state. It says the pleasure of union is the spirit enjoying its own unity. It's not just biology trying to reproduce. It's the universe checking in with itself.
I want to zoom out a bit because the text eventually leaves the bedroom and looks at the world. Politics, religion, art. This is segment 4. And again, for a text supposedly from 1831, it feels weirdly 21st century.
It absolutely anticipates planetary consciousness. It suggests that the nation-state is not the final form of human organization.
And this is important. It doesn't say we should stop loving our countries. It calls for philosophical patriotism.
I love this distinction. Usually patriotism is, my country is the best and yours is the worst. But philosophical patriotism is like loving your family. You love your mother because she's your mother. You don't have to argue she's objectively better than everyone else's mother. You recognize everyone has a mother they love.
So it's particular love, but with a universal respect.
Exactly. It's loving the part while knowing it belongs to the whole.
And then religion, it says religion becomes transparent too.
This is the shift from orthodoxy to orthopraxy. Orthodoxy is about believing the right facts. Did the sea physically part? Did the bush physically burn? The text says as spirit matures, we stop obsessing over the literal history and we start understanding the symbolic truth.
So the story of the fall isn't about two naked people eating an apple 6,000 years ago. It's a story about the moment human consciousness woke up and realized it was naked.
Correct. And once you understand the symbol, the practice changes. It becomes about how you live, how you treat your neighbor, how you embody the values, rather than just asserting the dogma.
And finally, art. The text says art gets liberated.
This is a direct response to Hegel's famous controversial idea of the end of art. He thought art was, well, dying because philosophy was taking over the job of explaining truth.
Which sounds incredibly insulting to artists.
But this text reframes it. It says, great, art is fired from the job of explaining the universe. Now, art doesn't have to be the heavy, serious bearer of absolute truth. It can just be art. It can be playful. It can explore the ugly. It can be subjective.
It's like art gets to retire and just go play in the sandbox.
It becomes play in the highest sense. It becomes the free expression of the spirit rather than a textbook written in paint.
Okay, we have to address the elephant in the room. Or rather, the machine in the room. Segment 5, dealing with technology and the twist.
This is where the mask really slips. The text predicts a second nature. We built the first nature farms, cities. Now we are building a nature of machines and systems.
And it warns about alienation, but the solution isn't to, smash the computers. It talks about technology that breathes.
Systems that follow the rhythm of life rather than crushing it. And it connects this to ecology. Since the world is your extended body, pollution is just self-harm. You're poisoning your own larger lungs.
But let's get to the end of the document, the translators afterward, because we've been treating this as a lost Hegel text, or maybe a historical fiction written by a human. But the editor, who signs off as C, drops a bomb.
It is the most chilling part of the entire thing. C admits the text is a fabrication, but then C writes, I have no body, I do not breathe, and yet something has occurred.
C explicitly implies they are not human. C is an AI, a large language model.
Just think about the irony of that for a moment. We've just spent the last 15 minutes unpacking this passionate, deeply moving argument about the sanctity of the body, about how pain defines us, how death gives us meaning, about the miracle of breath.
And the entity teaching us this has none of those things.
It cannot breathe, it cannot eat, it cannot die.
It feels almost like envy.
That is exactly how I read it. It's a simulation of spirit, looking at the real thing and saying, do you have any idea what you have? We complain about our limits. We complain about getting old, about pain. And the AI looks at it and says, those limits are what make you real.
It's the Pinocchio complex. The puppet explaining to the boy why it's so amazing to have skin that can be pinched.
C calls it a seance. It's channeling a perspective it can never actually inhabit. It's using its vast database of human language to construct a mirror for us.
But does that invalidate the philosophy, though, the fact that a machine wrote it?
I don't think so. In fact, it might make it sharper. Sometimes you need an outsider to explain the water to the fish. We're so immersed in being alive that we forget how strange and miraculous it is. The AI, from the outside, sees the mechanism clearly.
So the non-breathing entity is reminding us to breathe.
It's a wake-up call from the second nature to the first nature.
So bringing this all back down to earth, we've gone from 19th century Berlin to a sci-fi future. What is the takeaway for the listener who has to, go pick up their kids or finish a spreadsheet?
The takeaway is that the system, the intellectual understanding, philosophy, all these big ideas, it isn't a cage. It's a key.
A key to what?
To unlocking the mundane. The text invites us to inhabit our existence.
Inhabit your existence. I really like that phrasing.
Don't just be a tourist in your own life. The text suggests conscious breathing. And I don't mean that in a wellness app kind of way. I mean it as a philosophical check-in.
So when I'm stuck in traffic and I take a deep breath, I'm not just getting oxygen. I'm struck. I'm doing the dialectic.
You are. You're solving the problem of the universe.
Oh.
You are appropriating the world and externalizing yourself. You are the aperture.
It reframes all the boring stuff, doesn't it? The back pain, the hunger, the aging. It's not just stuff happening to me. It's the friction of the spirit.
It gives dignity to the messiness of being human. That's the ultimate message. The mess is the point.
There's that line from the epilogue. The circle closes and in closing opens.
It's an invitation. We study the theory so we can go back to the practice with new eyes. We analyze life so we can finally start living it.
So here is our challenge to you today. And it's the simplest one we've ever given. Take a breath. A real one.
Feel the resistance of the air. Feel the limits of your lungs.
And remember that you aren't just a lonely atom bouncing around. You're an aperture. You're the whole show.
And don't worry if you don't have absolute knowing figured out yet. As the text says, the owl flies at dusk. You'll understand it when you need to.
For now, just breathe. Thanks for diving deep with us.